everyone, and welcome to our monthly MasterMine Tips and Tricks webinar series. Glad you can join us today. We will be looking at MasterMine's email address management capabilities. Our presenter today is Rob Macklack, and he will be reviewing some of the new features in our upcoming version 7.1 release. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them on the question dialogue on your GoToMeeting. And so let's go ahead and get started. Take it away, Rob.
All right, thank you very much, Carnegie. Welcome everybody. Thanks so much for showing up to learn more about doing email address management with MasterMine. As Carnegie mentioned, one of the things we will talk about is some things that are new in version 7.1 coming up in the next month or two. But that's not the only thing we're talking about. We're going to have hopefully a very interesting discussion this morning, and I'll give you a chance to, at the end, if there's time, and I anticipate there will be, to ask your questions and kind of direct the conversation how you'd like for it to go. So here quickly is our agenda for now. We mentioned we'll be talking about some new features in version 7.1. We will also talk about email address reporting tips, how basically the best ways to get email addresses into your reports, depending upon what the purpose of the report is. We'll talk about actually updating and managing those email addresses with Updater, as well as just the sort of tools that you have inside your built-in MasterMine. Even if you don't have Updater, ways to kind of manage those better. And then we'll talk about some email marketing options. Since we're on the topic of address management, we'll also talk about some ways that you have available to you for managing email marketing campaigns within Goldmine. We won't go into a great deal of depth on those, but we will talk about some of your options and how best to do some good tips and tricks for how to handle those. So that's the agenda. Quick exposure to what's going to be in version 7.1 of MasterMine. So the release we're looking for is about September. We were aiming for September. I think it might tip over into October, depending on a couple of details, but that's basically the time frame. Key features. One of the things that you'll see, in fact, you'll see this as I'm demonstrating this here today, is that email address fields, by which, when we say address fields, we're talking about the address itself, but also all the fields that are associated with the address, the merge codes, the notes, and so on. All of those will be available much more frequently in MasterMine reports, and they will be it loads more efficiently. You may have noticed in the past, for example, when you include email record IDs, which you need to do for Updater, sometimes that'll really radically slow down a large report. When I say large, I'm talking about many tens of thousands of records and such. So for those of you who don't have really big databases, that feature will be a little bit less interesting, but for those who do have large ones, it's a pretty important step forward. We will also have the ability to manage website addresses. You already have that. You can include website addresses in your MasterMine reports, but this will also make available the notes that are associated with websites and make them both updatable through Updater. The Updater improvements themselves that in this newer version, a lot of it has to do with that emailing email address management issues. So you'll be able to add and delete secondary emails, which you can kind of do from some reports in MasterMine, but we're making it more sort of user-friendly and obvious how that actually works with version 7.1, as well as managing mixed primary and secondary email addresses. Right now, in the existing MasterMine that you have, you can handle primary email addresses pretty easily just by including the field. And as long as you know that when you go back and update, if you're using Updater against the consup table as opposed to the main contact table, then everything works just fine, but it requires a little bit more knowledge on the part of the user. We've simplified that and made it a more straightforward process, whether you're doing primary or secondary emails, and even allowing you to mix them in the same report and still update them. And then reliable updating of notes as well. This is not related to email addresses, but just handling of notes has been improved pretty well by MasterMine lately. And here we're talking about not just the notes in existing records, or excuse me, in email addresses, but the notes all around. And then finally, web update. This is kind of a big feature that I'm pretty excited about that will help you to keep up, once you're on version 7.1 of MasterMine, to be able to keep up with our current software. As long as you're current on our maintenance, you are entitled to version upgrades and small interim upgrades. This will essentially make it so that when you launch MasterMine, it'll go out and ping the web to see whether there is an update available. And if there is, it'll notify the user, and the user can just click on a button and it'll download the current software. And so you will no longer have to go through, if you're just doing incremental updates, no longer have to have any sort of a complicated installation process or reinstallation process. You're essentially just upgrading the software from the web. So pretty excited about that, and that should help to kind of smooth things on the support side. So let's get into the email handling aspect of what we're going to talk about today. And so to start with, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what we're going to talk about here, and then we'll go in and do it, and then we'll come back for discussion. So including emails and reports, as I mentioned, some updater tips for handling emails. We'll talk a little bit about email marketing, both handling campaigns within what you've already got in Goldmine, in other words, with your current Goldmine application, as well as some new things that Goldmine has coming up in relation to Constant Contact in particular, but I'll also talk about how you can work with Goldmine and other providers that also are like Constant Contact, where you upload email information up to a web service, and that's a somewhat more complicated thing. We'll also touch briefly on IntelliClick, which is a tool that you can get that enhances dramatically enhances what Goldmine can do as far as reaching out into the world through email and through your website and actually getting information back into the Goldmine database. That, to me, that's sort of the ultimate email marketing tool related to Goldmine, and so we'll talk about that as well. I won't go into detail about it very much because we do have some webinars coming up for those, but we'll come back to this slide when we're done. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to Goldmine now. And I apologize, by the way, for speaking very quickly this morning, but I want to respect your time and get done on time here. So let's talk a little bit about email reporting, creating reports with email addresses in them. So I'll go ahead and launch MasterMine here. One of the things I want to point out here is that before I even go into the create dialog is to talk about this dialog that you get at the beginning when you launch MasterMine. So this is your new version 7 dialog that helps you to manage existing reports and to have them available to you and others in a folder tree that makes sense within Goldmine. One of the things that I kind of wanted to illustrate here was within our MasterMine folder here, MasterMine being not the application but being the place where our reports are stored, and these are ones that are on my local machine here, so they're actually only available to me. But I have, you could have a tree here that's also on your network that also has shared reports in it. Within that, it makes sense to have a folder tree that breaks out your reports by function or by person or by whatever makes sense within your organization. And this Windows folder tree, MasterMine will remember it as soon as you open or save a report that's in a certain location on your network. So as soon as I open a report, for example, that's in my email management folder, even if somebody else put that report in there, this launch dialog will remember that location, and it'll show me that location and the MasterMine reports that are within it so that I can easily retrieve those. I like to see this as a really strong enhancement on the traditional deploying reports to a user's taskbar in Goldmine, which you can also still do. This way, the reports themselves are organized in a useful fashion that makes them easily findable, whether it's on your network or your own machine. This way, up here, having your MasterMine reports launchable from the taskbar in Goldmine, this makes it easier to sort of direct someone else to only have certain reports available to them if that's what you want to do, or to just have it so that your certain real key reports that you go back to day after day are just quick and easy to find and launch without actually going through the MasterMine launch dialog. So both things are still useful, but I just wanted to point out this kind of general concept of organizing and managing your reports within the folder tree over here. So I'm going to go in and actually create some reports and talk about creating reports that include the email address field. And so in the create dialog, this is where you really need to come to it with some thought about what's the purpose of the report that you're creating. So if you're just simply doing a report, pending or history activities or main contacts or whatever it is, and your report is essentially going to be main contact level contacts together with whatever other information you're doing, it's a simple enough thing already to include the primary email address. You just check the box. And so having checked the primary email address field, you can then go on and do whatever else you're going to do. And that, of course, will include that email address as though it were a regular field at the contact level in your reports. Where it gets a little more complicated is if you want to do some other stuff with this. If you want to do reporting with the additional contacts, or if you want to do, if the purpose of your report is not so much to have a report doing something, but you're using it as the basis for data cleanup, or to manage or export email addresses to one of those external web services that we talked about. If your purpose is, for example, knowing what all we have email addresses for, or even better, seeing a list of all of your email addresses and finding the ones that are malformed or that need to be filled in or that need to be completed in some way, then you're going to approach this in a slightly different way. So let's talk first about doing main and additional records, or excuse me, main and additional accounts. So with main and additional contacts, and of course that's the fields that are at the top of the screen as well as the ones that would be listed, down under your additional contacts tab in Goldmine. As soon as you check both of those, you have, of course, contact level information, company names, titles, addresses, and so on that could come from either the additional contact field or from, table, or from the main one. And MasterMine sort of treats those in parallel, really to presenting them to you almost as though they were in one table altogether. That's part of the reason to use MasterMine, is just for the simplicity of doing reports, that go across tables like this. What we're adding here is, you'll notice that email address that's included here actually comes from a third table. That's it's actually from the consup table, which is another sort of one-to-many table in Goldmine, but it's labeled separately as EM as opposed to CX, which is our sort of composite contact one and consup approach for getting these two types of data together. So they're labeled here as though they're on a separate table, email address. The reason for that is, if all you're doing is pulling in the email address field, you just check it on, you include it, that's fine. But if what you're intending to do is really know more about those other, about the email address itself, so for example, if you want to include, is this a main or additional email address? What are the merge codes associated with that email address? Merge codes, of course, being one of the key parts of Goldmine that you use to determine who gets an email. And that's true whether you're using the built-in Goldmine email client to send out your emails, as well as if you are using this for the purposes of just exporting emails to one of those outside services. For that matter, it also is very useful if you're using IntelliClick. So the merge codes are your mechanism within Goldmine to determine, should someone receive an email about whatever topic I'm on based on what's in the merge codes, or should I exclude them because they've opted out, or whatever. The other fields associated with email addresses, the name of the contact that email address is associated with. These other ones are more technical ones. These are the actual checkboxes that you have inside of the inside of the email address field when you're looking at it. For example, I'll pull it up here. So you've got the contact's name that email address is associated with. These are the checkboxes I was just mentioning, the merge codes. And then, of course, you've got notes down here. Each email address has its own merge codes, its own notes, its own settings on these as far as whether it's primary, secondary, and so on. So that's the Goldmine side. On the MasterMine side, those show up here as fields that you can just check on to include. Notes as well, and now currently in the version of Goldmine that you're on right now, I don't think you can include the notes at all, but we are going to include that in version 7.1 so you can get those notes. Why is that important? Well, oftentimes, depending on how you as an organization manage your email addresses, you might include in your merge codes actually the positive things that say why someone should receive emails. Okay, they are interested in product X and product Y, but not product Z. Okay, then you put in X and Y, and if you put in X and Y in your merge codes, they'll receive your emails that are about product X or about product Y, but they'll be ignored for product Z ones. So that's how merge codes are actually meant to work inside of in the regular course of things with Goldmine. That's how the Goldmine email sending mechanism works. If they opt out, then you need someplace else to indicate, hey, these guys have opted out of receiving any emails from us. There are there are legal restrictions on what we can do as far as people who have actively opted out with us. So oftentimes you'll either, if the sort of current recommended way to work with Goldmine is, well, if they opt out from emails, just take out any merge codes that are there, and if it's blank, don't send any emails to them. That's one option. Another way, if you're working with some of these other services, especially if you're managing your email addresses in the more kind of subtle fingertip way that I'm recommending overall here, then you'll probably want to be a little bit more explicit about the opt-out. You might put in unsubscribe as a word in the notes, or opted out, or opt out and the date that they opted out, or whatever you need to do in order to keep track of both the fact that they opted out as well as the reason and the timing that they had for opting out. And you have your own reasons for needing or wanting to be able to do that, especially if you get audited and need to be clear about when somebody opted out and so on. So all those fields are now available, and they are easily enough included in your reports by checking on the appropriate tabs over here. So that was kind of a long-winded way of talking about both MasterMine as well as Goldmine itself. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of that and come back to our MasterMine Create dialog. So, and by the way, when you include let's say your email notes, that actually will not slow down the production of your MasterMine report significantly, because there's not actually a lot of work being done with those notes. That's sort of beside the point, I guess. It's just sometimes people are concerned about that, because when you pull notes from other areas in MasterMine in Goldmine, sometimes that can be a slowing down factor. So you don't generally want to include notes just arbitrarily in your MasterMine reports. Only include them if you really know that you're going to need them for the purposes of the reporting that you're doing. And the second thing to note is this one right here, EM records. EM records is actually the record ID of the email address record in Goldmine. I want to point that out. In fact, if I switch over here, you can actually see the underlying field name in Goldmine. That's email rec ID. This is, by the way, a really useful button that people hopefully know about. If you include the email record ID, that enables Updater, Updater, later on to actually find that record when you want to update it on the Goldmine side. So again, thinking about what's the purpose for creating this report initially. If it's just for reporting purposes, no need to include these other email fields typically, unless you want to actually do the reporting, let's say on merge codes or such. But if you're going to be using Updater with that field, or excuse me, with that email address, then you're going to want to include the email records field in the report, and that will allow Updater then later on to find and work with that data as appropriate. So something important to remember. Okay, so those are the three kind of most common scenarios: main contacts, additional contacts, or main and additional contacts together I guess there's probably 4 also. If you go to the pending activities, you also want to include email addresses typically with your reports. In this list, I don't think we're actually going to see it here, but in version 7.1, you actually will have the email addresses also, I think, available to you in just the same way to include in the reports. That may not be worked out yet, but I anticipate that it will. The other kind of really major area that I want to cover here is templates. So at least as far as the reporting is concerned. So as you know, there are 140 templates built into MasterMine, or actually more than 140 now, that do all kinds of things. If you are not familiar with working with templates already, all you need to do really is check the box or check the radio button there to say use template. And depending on your selection on the left, the templates that are available will all be listed here. If there are only history-associated ones, you'll see only the history-related ones. If you hit list all templates, then you get them all. It's a long list to look through, but we do have this nice key search, key field or keyword search capability. So if you say, I want to see only the reports that relate to emails, and hit the search button, here's a list of email-related reports, and these are ones that have the word email in the name or in the description or such. Note that as I'm hovering over each of these templates, you get that little description on the right-hand side of what this report actually does. So this list of templates actually is it's 7 reports that have actually importance for various things. The top 2 are the only ones that are related specifically to managing email addresses, whether it's dealing with bad email addresses, finding the malformed email addresses in your system and dealing with those, or pulling out an email address list would be the second one for that extraction that we talked about. The other ones, the third one actually has to do with emails themselves, actually your email boxes in Goldmine, in that case, managing your incoming emails for the most part. Which is a very important thing to do. I'm not going to talk about that much since we're talking mainly about email addresses here, but that, by the way, is from a Goldmine management standpoint is important to be able to see who's got 1 million incoming email addresses accumulating in the mailbox and slowing everybody else down working with Goldmine. And what can I do about those? This inbox tree actually is a really good thing for that. That's all I'm going to say about that. These last 4. The missing email address one here, this actually is also one of the email address management reports. So the last 3 of these last 4 are actually more about managing activity. So there we're talking about emails that have been sent or not sent. Emails that it's actually looking at the activity and just whether or not you include sending or receiving an email as an activity for doing your reporting against history stuff. I'm going to focus for today's purposes on these top 2, bad email addresses and email address list. So bad email addresses, that looks for malformed email addresses within your Goldmine database. It's a very important, and this is one of the things, as a user of MasterMine within your own organization, you can do this, or if this isn't really your job to maintain the quality of the email addresses in your database, then your marketing manager or whoever it is who's responsible for the email addresses really ought to have MasterMine and have access to a report like this. If at the very least they ought to have a share license of MasterMine so that you can create this report to them, maybe put it on their taskbar in Goldmine and just let them open it up every few days or every week or every month or whatever it takes so they can see what are the bad email addresses that have crept into the database and get them fixed. So here's what that looks like. I'm going to go ahead and run this bad email addresses. So I have it selected. When I selected it, my default fields were selected here. Again, you can include whatever you want to in the report so that you can manage these appropriately. But by default, in the bad email addresses, we actually include the record IDs so that Updater will still be able to work with them. The email address itself, the priority of whether it's a main or additional a primary or secondary email address, and so on. So the basic fields that you need are included by default, but again, go in and check in whatever else might be related. Oh, I only want to look at, we've got such a large database, I only want to look at the ones that are associated with one particular product or one particular division or whatever. You can do that by selecting the appropriate fields. So I'll run this bad email addresses report, and I'll overwrite kind of an older one that I've got there. And it has created that report. I'm going to say OK. And voila, without too much ado here, you get in Excel a nice report of your malformed email addresses. Now, if they have no email address at all, they're not going to show up in this report if it's just simply missing. Note also, by the way, how quickly this pulled. Even though we're doing a report, now this was a very small report that we created here, but if I had done this with 100,000 records, email addresses, as one of our customers recently did, and included the email address or the email address record ID field in there, that actually would have gone a little bit slower. This would have taken a while to run this. These are going to happen with version 7.1 very fast, and you see how that one just came up in a flash, really. It went through the whole database, found the malformed ones, and as you can see, we've got ones here where the website address was accidentally put into the email address field. Or in this case, there's a comma instead of a period in there in the just before the suffix. Here's an @ sign in there instead, or an ampersand instead of the @ sign. Another one with the website. You can sort of get the idea. This last one here is one I wanted to point out, though. Here, the dot before the .com was left out. There's still a dot in the name, so technically it meets the email criterion of needing to have an @ sign and a dot in it. But the MasterMine will actually find it if the dot does not come after the @ symbol. So in this case, because even though there was a dot in the name, there's not a dot before com, so MasterMine is going to detect it, and as a user, you need to go and fix it. As I mentioned before, you can do your mass fixing of it using Updater, and I'll talk about that a little bit more here in a moment. But if you've got your process in place and you've really just sort of got your exception, you're using this kind of as an exception report to periodically go in and just see where are the malformed ones. I should only get a handful of them because we've been keeping them up, over time. Then it's just a matter of drilling through. You can go one at a time, or you can maybe hit all 5 of them to just know that you're going to be hitting them one by one on the Goldmine side, and let's say double click to drill through and to the Goldmine record, and then fix it. And one by one you can do that. So this is the sort of one by one way that you would fix these reports, and you can see you get those 5 or 10 or 15 records very quickly fixed. But now let's talk a little bit about using Updater to do this. As I mentioned, version 7.1 is going to work a little bit more smoothly than it has in the past, but in the current version of MasterMine, you could actually, especially if we're dealing with primary email addresses, just simply make the change to how this ought to be. And I'm not going to actually do this, but I'm going to show you, sort of go through the process. So, go through and put your @ sign in that one, and put in your dot over here, and go down to the next one and fix that one. And you can sort of see how it's pretty faster and easier to go this way. Now, these last two, you may want to just simply delete those. You may just assume, okay, we've already got the web address in the proper place, although you might want to, on individual ones, you might want to go to it and just see, oh, well, actually, we've got that one in the wrong place, so you want to move it to the other one rather than delete it. But let's suppose for a moment, here, I'll just add it here as a website. And you can, again, using your pivot table on the MasterMine side, you could actually see, well, all right, just for the ones that look like web addresses, let's pull in the web address field and show them side by side so we can isolate the ones that actually need to be deleted versus the ones that actually have to be moved from one to the other. And your version 7 will allow you to do that. But in this case, I've just manually put it in both places. All right, it's in both places. So rather than have to come over here and delete the record from Goldmine, we'll actually make it so you could actually just go over here and put in a space. And that's significant. And we'll talk about this logically about how this needs to work for you as a user as well. Because sometimes you've got a space and you want that space to be moved over into Goldmine. Sometimes you've got a space because you didn't for whatever reason you didn't include that information or it wasn't available to you when you built the report. And just because you have a space, you don't want to necessarily put a space on the goldmine side. MasterMine is going to capture that fact and let you make a decision initially about how you want to handle it. So I'm going to go ahead and launch Updater and show you how this would work. So when you go to run Updater with MasterMine version 7, you're going to see it's going to know that you're working with email addresses, and you're going to get this extra window that comes up as Updater is loading. It'll say, you appear to be managing email addresses, and then it'll tell you what's going to happen with Updater. And the reason for this special handling here, of course, is that email address is not just one simple field associated with the name that's in the database. It's in its own table, and it has other fields associated with that email address. And sometimes you want to just update it in place, and sometimes you don't, and that's why this extra dialog is here. So if the value in Excel is non-blank, so in other words, if there's something here, and the target record has an email address, the address here will replace it. That's a pretty straightforward thing. If the value in Excel is non-blank and the target record has no email address, then it's going to add a whole email address record on the goldmine side, and it'll make it be, since it has no email address on the other side, it will actually make it be the primary email address for that record. If we are looking at, I'll just sort of add this extra thing right here. If we are looking at both primary and additional email addresses, and this is where it gets kind of complicated, MasterMine will actually, when it goes to add that new email address, will actually go over here to the email priority field, and if it exists, and if it says secondary in here instead of primary, it will add that address as a secondary field, link it to that name that's being used, and take care of all that housekeeping for you in the background. And there's actually quite a lot going on there on the goldmine side that makes that coordinate. You'd be surprised. So in MasterMine in version 7.1, we'll handle that connection. Currently, if you go to update email addresses with MasterMine, you can do the primary ones just fine, but when it comes to the secondary ones, unless you're doing things already in place, unless it's just updating existing ones, which it will do, if it's just updating existing email addresses, then you're fine. In this case, we're fixing malformed email addresses, but the email addresses already exist, so there's no question. But if you were actually filling in empty spaces, and you're updating secondary as well as primary email addresses, then you're going to have a problem with the current version of MasterMine, but the new one will actually handle it more appropriately. The last thing that gets added here is this question where you have to add it. You have a decision that's required. And it asks you, if the address value in Excel is blank and the goldmine account record already has an email address, do you want Updater to delete that address from the goldmine side? So in other words, what it's asking you is, did you go through a process here where you found bad email addresses and you just deleted them from this side, and that's a signal to MasterMine, hey, I want to actually delete that out of goldmine. I don't just simply want to replace, leave an email address there but make it blank. Leave an email address record, rather, there, but make it blank. Or I don't want to do, or actually I think it'll just be ignored by the current version of MasterMine. So this allows you to say more explicitly what it is that you're trying to do on the goldmine side so you don't mess anything up. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and say yes. If it's blank, I want it to delete that field on the other side. And this actually takes care of the other settings under Updater. So it knows that it's going to be going to the concept table to be doing this update. It's using the email record ID as its matching thing. So all you really have to do at this point is take it off test run and hit OK, and it will go ahead and update that data. I'm not going to go ahead and do it, but I think you all know how. Those of you who have Updater already know how it works, and those who don't yet, you should talk to us and get Updater. That's, I think, all we're going to talk about as far as Updater things. Our timing seems to be pretty good so that we can cover the rest of what we want to do. So I'm going to pause here for a moment and give you a chance, if you want to post questions. And Carnegie, if you've got any questions that have come up so far that you have not already covered yourself or that you think might be of general interest, go ahead and let me know about those.
We have two good questions. One of them, could you cover how to use Goldmine to send an email to current contacts with their Goldmine information? So the contacts one reviews and updates anything that is out of date, and secondly had an opt-in or opt-out for future mailings.
I don't think I understood the first part of that question. So we're talking about inside of Goldmine itself, how to handle the sending the emails? Because I'm going to do a little section on that.
Current contacts with their Goldmine information. So the contact reviews and updates anything that is out of date.
Oh, okay. I see what we're talking about. So
okay, good.
What they're asking is, can we sort of efficiently send out an email that contains, that says, here's what I've got for your company name, contact, your phone number, your email address, and as a result of getting that email, the user has some simple way of essentially updating your Goldmine for you.
Exactly. He had just clarified that, so perfect.
Yeah. I wish Goldmine had that capability. I don't think it does. That's sort of my quick answer. You can. What I have seen done is to do that in connection with a web page. So it is possible to set up a web import. I won't go into this in too much detail, but I'll tell you that this is possible. So you can set up a web page, and it may or may not be a part of your regular Goldmine or your regular hosted website. But you probably want to have it out there and have it look like your website. But what you can do is set up so that you've got an email that is imbued with your with the user's information. That has a URL that when they click on it, it goes out to that web page, fills in the fields with their current information that you were included in the email address, and when they get to that web page, all they have to do is update the fields on that web page, hit the go button, or hit the submit button, and that would return a web import file to your Goldmine, and it would update Goldmine. So it requires a little bit of construction, some work with your website to do that, but that is distinctly possible to do. I've just sort of said to you in a few words sort of how that process would function, but all of that could be done with some setup basically of a form on your website, and the process on the email side, on the Goldmine side to send out the email.
That wouldn't work for opt-in and opt-out, right? Web import.
It actually would if opt-ins and opt-outs are usually a somewhat more complicated thing than that. But you certainly could put an opt-in, opt-out button on that web page that updates when they hit the submit button. So you could actually wind up with a field that's over here in Goldmine that says opt-in or opt-out that they themselves are kind of managing. It could be done as a field. It could probably be done. It could be done as a detail record. Although I think you'd probably want to do it as a field. So yeah, actually, that would work. That would work. I'll talk a little bit more about managing opt-ins and opt-outs with Constant Contact and IntelliClick here in a moment. But yeah, that process would work. If you want us to help you work it out on your end, get some support units from MasterMine, and we can get online with you and kind of work out the details with you. So that's one way to handle that. Was that one question or two, Carnegie?
It was one question.
Oh, okay.
Yes. I have another one. Can you explain merge codes a little bit so people know?
Yeah, because that is a little bit confusing. So let's look at an email address record here. So you're probably familiar with the mail merge field that's at the Goldmine at the contact level, and that one is typically used as a way of coding records to be included or not included in more traditional snail mail kind of email merges. Mail merges. So when you're in Goldmine and you do actions and Actually, here, sort of show you what those are. So write a letter to the contact, to a contact, or to a set of contacts, or do a, in this case, actually, it's more important, a mail merge. So mail merge is send a letter. Email merge, obviously, is send an email. And the two of them look at different locations to determine whether someone's going to be included in getting that email. But when you, I'll do the email merge one since here, this is what we're talking about here. So when you go in to do an email merge, you click email merge. You say, I want to choose, actually here, let's go to me as a user, and I'm going to choose this template. So we're going to send the you need a widget email to some set of recipients. Obviously, with mail merge, you can just choose one email that you're going to have go out. Or you can say, we're going to use, I want it to go to a whole set of prospects, let's say. You can use MasterMine's group building function to create a group within Goldmine who are going to be the recipients of this. I've got lots of groups in here of ones that I've created in the past. And if anybody wants me to go back and talk about creating Goldmine groups, I can do that at the end as well. But in this dialog, in addition to determining, okay, who's the group that's going to receive them, and by the way, that group is at the account level. So if there's 5 people in here, 4 additional plus 1 main one, do we want it to only go to the primary one, or do we want it to go to all 5 of them, the top one plus the additional contacts? And then this last one here is to actually limit who's going to get it based on what merge codes are in there. So remember, I talked about whether they've got a merge code field that's got X and Y but not Z, meaning they're interested in products X and Y but not interested in product Z. Then you can go in here and say, let's send it to all the ones that have an X or all the ones that have a Y, and that will focus your email target list to be only those whose merge codes have that X or Y in there. And by the way, this is a functionality that's built into Goldmine. It's been there for years and years. A lot of people wind up not knowing about this or not knowing how to use the merge codes field, and it's partly because I think, this is my own theory about this, it's always been just so hard to manage those merge codes, especially email merge codes, because who knew that to update the email merge codes for Jay Benson, you actually have to open up the email address record and find that merge codes field and update it there. If you're doing that management of these merge codes with Updater, that's a much more straightforward process because it's all right there in columns inside of Excel, and you just have to, go down the column and change your codes, X here, Y there, X, Y, on the next one, and, Z on the next one, and so on. And then once you've done that, hit your Updater button, and, just go, just rips right through them all and updates those email addresses, and then you can use this process, this merge process inside Goldmine to send out the emails. That is a much more straightforward, I think, way of managing your emails and managing your email campaigns than trying to do it other ways. So I hope that that sort of summary there is gives you a good understanding of how to use those merge codes.
Just to point out that it's also possible to have multiple merge codes in the merge code field, so multiple letters representing. Right.
X and Y, having X and Y in there means they're eligible to get both X and Y, but not Z. And sometimes what you'll see over here in the field lookups, you'll see the individual ones plus another one that says XYZ, so that when they want to go to all of them, they can just click on that and go to all of them. Or if they've got on the lookup, this is the same lookup that you have in the individual addresses. And so if you basically are saying, by default, I want people to get all of our email marketing stuff, have them have XYZ in there by default, and then to remove them, or based on whatever they opt out of, just take out the letter that's associated with what they opted out of. And again, that's easier to do on an Excel spreadsheet where they're all just listed there versus one by one, although you obviously have to have that one by one ability if somebody calls you up and says, get me off that list, and you want to be able to go to that record and make that change.
And I know there's other things that you want to get to, but I think these two are pretty easy answers.
Okay.
Will this new MasterMine work with older versions like 6.7 of Goldmine?
I think I even know who asked that question. um, it will work with the old ones. With the older one, that's part of the reason that we're a little bit delayed here on our release is that I'm not entirely sure that it's going to work on the DBase versions of 6.7 and earlier. Because of although it should. It's partly going to be a question of just whether those really early versions of Goldmine had the necessary support on the back end, the API, the program interface, whether those were there. I'm pretty sure that it will work. We probably won't do extensive testing on the DBase side because our actual DBase based users are starting to dwindle now. But I believe it will. I believe it should work. If you're on 6.7, it should work because the API has been fairly stable since then. If you're on version 5 or 4 of Goldmine, then I would say probably not.
And lastly, will it be possible to import emails from an Excel list into Goldmine?
To import emails from an Excel list into Goldmine. Yes and no. The trick there will be lining them up. So in other words, if you only had an email address list, if you literally only had the addresses and you didn't have contact names, then there's no way to match them up with what you are doing in Goldmine. But if you have email address list, let's say, and names, and something else maybe that indicates that you've got the right name. There's a lot of John Smiths in the world, so who knows whether jsmith@gm or gmail.com is the actual John Smith that you want. But if you've got an email address plus some other information that helps you to link it to some specific record in Goldmine, then what we would do for the most usually is we would make a VLOOKUP connection between the two of them, and then having done that, we can essentially get the account number from the Goldmine list side and the address from the list that you're importing side, and then Updater will take those two and fill them in or replace what you've got depending on what the choice is that you do when you do Updater. Remember I mentioned about the possibility of either updating what's there, if there's nothing, actually filling in and creating a new record. I don't think that you will have the option, in fact I know you won't have the option of handling the somewhat more subtle case where you've got a match but the email address is different. You've got a match with the contact record, but the email address is different that you're bringing in from the new one, and like it won't give you a choice of saying, do you want to replace the one that's there, or do you want to just create a whole new email address? I don't think that that's going to be an option. But for the more sort of general case where really what you're wanting to do is just get some email addresses into records that already exist in Goldmine, I think it's something of a process to do it to match them up. But once you've got them matched up, Updater will create those new records, those new email address support records that are necessary to handle it. Hope that's not too complicated an answer, but okay. Is that it on questions at this point, Carnegie?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Carry on.
Thank you. All right, so the last things that I was going to cover here, and we've got just about the right amount of time here, although we should be able to take questions if people want them, have to do with using those external email marketing applications. When I say external, there's things like Constant Contact that are completely external to Goldmine, or that actually in the most current version of Goldmine, they're actually working on an interface between between Goldmine and Constant Contact, but it still involves uploading data to the Constant Contact engine on the web, and then downloading things, and it's not going to be it's not really completely integrated with Goldmine in the way that you might imagine. They just made it a little bit easier. But even if you're just using Constant Contact right now, and you're just using the MasterMine that you have right now and the Goldmine that you have right now, you certainly can use MasterMine to more efficiently create and upload email address reports for that purpose. I'm going to go back to the Create dialog here, and I'm going to run the email address list report. And what I wanted to point out with this second report here is this is an email-centric report. In other words, it's not give me all the contacts and the email addresses that are associated with them. It's give me all the email addresses and the contact information that's related to it. The difference there being kind of on the margins. It's your Goldmine database may contain email addresses that are not necessarily linked to specific names in Goldmine. They might be linked in the sense that they're, Jessica Benson. Actually, I don't know if we've got actually an example in here already. Or here we go. I know that there's one over here. Layla Hughes has a primary email address, right? But she also has a secondary email address that is still her. It's her second email address. It's still her, but it's not the primary one that you use in Goldmine to contact her. You've got that as a backup. You may not know which of these two is her real current one that she looks at every day. You've just somehow in the course of over the years, you've acquired both of these email addresses for her, and you don't know which one's the current one. Well, you want them both. You still want to send your marketing to both to make sure that you get to her. But you want to manage those in the ways that I talked about before on the Excel side, and you want to see your MasterMine reports include both of those, even though she's got if you click on primary email address, you're only going to get the main one here. So that's kind of, hopefully in concept, that kind of gets across the idea of why if you're creating the report for the purpose of managing the email address list, then it's probably better to come in here and do this one as opposed to build from the contact perspective and just include the fields. So if you choose the email address list report, again, you still have all those EM fields, the ones that the other ones that are associated with the email address. You can also include your other contact one fields. So if you wanted to make sure I'm only looking at customers or only looking at end users and so on, then you still will be able to filter based on in this case your record type or your contact type field, as well as again your user defined fields, anything else that's there. So check those on before you run the report. But basically, that's going to give you a full email list for everything that you have in Goldmine, selective according to whatever filtering you want to put on it. And that report looks like this by default. It's every company. Now there's only 300 in here, but if you've got a current version of Excel 2007 or higher, this could have up to 1 million rows in it. So if you've got 1 million Goldmine account records, then and every one of them has a unique company name, this is going to go all the way down to 1 million rows. Probably not an effective way to work with those. Probably, if you've got, let's say hundreds of thousands, even tens of thousands will still work pretty efficiently inside of Excel here. But if you're at the hundreds of thousands level or 1 million, then you're probably going to want to, deal with these more in summary than in detail the way I'm doing here. But notice the columns going across here. None, secondary, and primary. So those are what we call email priority. So if it's the primary email address, you know what that means. It's the email address that's associated with a primary contact record in Goldmine. If it's secondary, that means it's another email address that's in there that may or may not be linked to a specific additional contact in Goldmine. Again, remember, it's possible to have email addresses that are sort of free-floating, that are associated with the Goldmine contact record, but aren't tied to a specific contact at the contact level. And then we have none, account records in Goldmine that have no email address at all. Why is that important? Should be fairly obvious. If I'm managing an email address list, I'm supposed to be doing my marketing to those people. I want to know who doesn't have an email address as well, so that I can, for example, quickly make a list of, here I'll do a little MasterMine magic here and say, well, let's just look at the ones that have no email address, but let's break them down by the account manager who's supposed to be handling those. And okay, Jane O'Hare, she's really kept up with hers pretty well. She's only got 2 that are missing email addresses. And let's maybe use the record type to indicate, okay, we've got customers, employees, past contacts. So it's prospects that don't have them. That's important, but not quite as important as customers that don't have email addresses. And then drill down selectively on whatever section of that needs to be handled, and then go through your process. Either you are the person yourself who's in charge of maintaining that list, in which case you could go out and look up the email addresses or make the phone calls to get that information. Or you could say to Jane O'Hare, listen, Jane, you've got a nearly perfect email address list in Goldmine, except there are 2 prospects that are missing. Let's drill down together and send Jane this list, if it's 2 or 20 or 200, or actually give her this MasterMine report and say, Jane, I want you to open that report and drill through to these one by one, make the calls, fill in the email address on the Goldmine side, and very quickly we're gonna get our email address list improved. And by the way, one of the things I like about when people get MasterMine and start getting other users using it is the quality of the data starts to improve instead of decrease. Because now you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people who are responsible for keeping in this case, the email list up to date, and they've got the tools to efficiently do that versus one person or nobody is in charge of the email address list quality, and it just deteriorates over time. In this case, you've got interested parties. These are sales reps who want to know that the marketing is being received by those people, so that when they call up, they don't just get a blank voice on the other side. They've got somebody who's received some marketing before, and they know, vaguely at least what you're talking about, versus really cold calls because even your emails haven't gotten through. So we're getting pretty close to the end of the hour here, and I did want to talk about those. I'm going to do a quick scan here to see if there's other things that I haven't covered. I believe I've talked about everything I wanted to. One last thing I did want to talk about was groups, and I mentioned groups here a little bit earlier. Again, by the way, go ahead and put in your questions if you've got other questions that you want me to cover, but I'm going to just talk about this last topic here. Goldmine groups. One of the things that people use MasterMine for a lot is as either at the sales management or the sales assistant level. It kind of happens at both and not so much in between, to assign either calls or to assign activities within Goldmine across a whole set of records. So maybe the sales manager or again the sales assistant has the job of, in part, finding the highest priority leads in the database and creating a group on the Goldmine side that a sales rep can then use to target that group. Well, one of the things that's going to happen is, let's say you do that. You find, let's see, okay, here's the 39 prospects that I want Tina L. to follow up on, and go and get some email addresses for them, or even just make phone calls to follow up on. Double-click on the 39. That's easy enough to make a list. You can actually print out that list and give it to somebody. Or you can go over here to the MasterMine drill down toolbar and say, create a Goldmine group with those. And I think my group dialog came up on my other screen. No, it didn't. There it is. Okay, so my Goldmine group dialog comes up, and I name the group and I assign it to them. Well, that group continues to exist over time as long as nobody deletes it out of Goldmine. So as a manager or as the account assistant, or the sales assistant, or whoever it is, or for that matter as the sales rep yourself, they can actually pull MasterMine reports based on that group. So you can see, well, what is the progress being made burning through these high value leads? What's the process in getting toward the sale? Where's their current stage on all those? Can I focus in on the ones that are at a low stage and get them moved up? Can I focus in on the ones that are at a high stage and do the next activity on the Goldmine side that will push that sale over the top? Having groups in Goldmine is a way to not just manage email addresses. It's a way really to sort of segment your database and track what happens to those segments over time, so that that what gets assigned actually gets done. So just wanted to mention that last bit there, and we are at the end of our hour. I appreciate your patience going through all these concepts with us. We've actually covered quite a lot. I'll give Carnegie one last chance to throw any questions to me. Otherwise, we'll say thanks. Carnegie, do you have any more?
Really quick one that's on the whole Goldmine groups. Can update or make changes to Goldmine groups?
Yes, actually it can. One of the things, I'll just pull up the dialog so you can see it. You need to have a MasterMine report that is built against groups. Groups are actually stored in the cont sup table. It's actually a type of cont sup record. What I really should do probably to illustrate it, you would be using cont sup to do that, and the selections are right there. But probably the most important thing you need to know is, how do I create the MasterMine report that's based on groups? And I think the word is group, but let's see about that. Yeah, group members. So you can actually build MasterMine reports that are based on who's in what group. This is something this is one of the kind of rarely understood things about especially the management of Goldmine using MasterMine. This will actually give you, across all of your groups, a sense of who's in which groups, how many do I have in each one of these groups, and it will actually allow you, because within there you've got the ID record. Actually, do we have to do that separately or not? I think it's actually included in there. Yeah, because the account record of it is actually stored in the group record on the Goldmine side. You can actually add or remove the account number from that group, and essentially remove one or a whole set or dozens or thousands of group members from a particular group on the Goldmine side. It's pretty cool. But you do have to have some understanding. If you're going to do that, you do have to have some understanding of what it is that you're doing. So I would start with this group members report that gives you an overview of who's in which groups and who owns the groups and so on. And from there, drill down and then essentially manipulate members of the group by adding or removing the group member record from the group table on the Goldmine side. Again, if that's something that you want to get help with, that's something that we can help you with online. Falls under the the regular support stuff. Okay, Carnegie, anything else before we wrap it up?
I believe that's it.
Okay, I think this has been personally, I think this was a very good session, although I did all the talking. I hope that you found it useful. If you've got complaints or questions or things that you would like for us to do differently, if you'd like for me to speak more slowly and not try to cover so much stuff, please give us that feedback as well. But I want to thank everybody for taking the time to sit in with us today on email management, and we look forward to working with you again in another month. And the last thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to leave up this slide on the screen here so that you know we do have this webinar for IntelliClick users coming up in about a week, actually. If you're already an IntelliClick user, that's who this webinar is aimed at. We'll be talking about using MasterMine together with IntelliClick. If you're not an IntelliClick user yet and you want to know more about it, we will in early September be doing a webinar that's for MasterMine users about IntelliClick, because one of the the important things to know is that IntelliClick is this great product that integrates with Goldmine very closely, allowing you to send and receive emails, track the results of those emails. So it's not just did somebody receive it, but did they open it? Did they actually click on a link in it? And if they did, you get that message back in Goldmine. If they clicked and went to certain pages on your website, it will track in your Goldmine that they were on that website on that date at that time as a result of clicking through that email. It's a wealth of information that gets added into your Goldmine database as a result of having IntelliClick and adding that functionality. So if you do email marketing, I urge you to consider IntelliClick, to come to our webinar that's going to be in early September. If you're too excited and you want to learn about it right now, you can go right out and learn about it at the IntelliClick website. But I would say, please let them know that we sent you, because we'll get some credit for that. And the other thing to know is MasterMine fits with IntelliClick really well, because IntelliClick is going to generate a lot of information into Goldmine. With MasterMine, you're able to efficiently manage that information that's there, whether it's updating it, normalizing it, or even doing reporting on it, and taking your follow-up actions based on it. The two of these really do marry together really well. So we'll be talking about that for MasterMine users who don't yet have IntelliClick. We'll be talking about that in early September. So I urge you to come to that webinar, plan to be there, watch for our email that advertises it. Make sure we're not falling into your spam folder. Um, I'm excited about being able to show you that in early September. So with that, I'm just going to leave this slide up. Thank you all very much for your time this morning, and we will see you in another month on the 3rd Thursday of September for another for another MasterMine end user tips and tricks webinar.